What's good, y'all? And welcome back to another preseason preview video. In today's video, we're going over the Miami Heat. In case this is your first preseason preview video of mine that you're seeing, basically what I do is go over the offseason, give a little recap there, and then try to look into the future and see what we can expect in this upcoming season. I'm making videos on all 30 NBA teams, and I'm almost finished, so make sure you check out the channel for the ones that I already uploaded, and then make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the ones coming out going forward. But let's just jump right into it and start talking about the Miami Heat. Last year was a very weird season for the Heat, to say the least. On the court-wise, they ended up as the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference, going 37-45. But there is a little bit of context around that, considering they were dealing with the Jimmy Butler drama pretty much the entire season, up until the resolution of that, of course, gets him traded to the Golden State Warriors. But Jimmy Butler only played 25 games for the Heat, and he sat out a lot, and when that's your best player, obviously, you're going to struggle at some extent. Things got a little bit better after that Jimmy saga ended, though. I did mention they finished as the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference. They did win both of their play-in tournament games and became the first 10th seed to make the playoffs. That was pretty short-lived, though, because they, of course, got swept by the Cavs in the first round. And now, this year, it's going to be the first full year post Jimmy Butler era, so it should be pretty interesting. Usually most teams, when they trade their best player, they enter a rebuild. We all know the Miami Heat don't like to rebuild, and it doesn't seem like they're going to be doing that, so it should be cool just to see how they pivot and still try to compete. And that's an easy segue right into the offseason for the Miami Heat. Of course, before we talk about the guys that they are actually bringing in, I do want to highlight some of their losses. And I know they did have some big losses, obviously, like Jimmy Butler and those guys included in that trade. Since that was mid-season, I'm not going to be talking about it. This is just who they lost this offseason. And I'll kick it off by talking about Duncan Robinson, who was traded to the Detroit Pistons in a sign-and-trade deal. He was a free agent. The Miami Heat obviously didn't really see eye to eye with how much they wanted to pay him, but at least they were able to get some type of value back for him in the sign and trade. And Duncan Robinson was very up and down for the Miami Heat for his career, because he started off as a two-way guy, was super underrated, then he broke out, got that big contract, and then underperformed and was pretty rough for a few years. Then he kind of worked on his game, got back to being a rotational guy. Now, of course, he is out there in Detroit. I do think that he brought a lot of good things to the Miami Heat, especially as a movement shooter with a lot of length. There's just not a lot of guys in the NBA that are as good of a three-point shooter as Duncan Robinson with his size. And then, like I mentioned, he worked on his game to even become a little bit more than that and be able to attack off a pump fake when people really close out hard and turn into, a really good role player. Like I said, though, the amount of money that he wanted, the Miami Heat couldn't give him, so at least they were able to do a sign-and-trade. We'll talk about what they got back in that sign-and-trade in a little bit. They also traded away Haywood Highsmith to the Brooklyn Nets. This was more of a salary dump. They traded Haywood Highsmith and a 2032 second-round pick in exchange for a 2026 second-round pick. So again, they gave up 1 second, got one back, and then got off the contract of Haywood Highsmith. And I like Haywood Highsmith a lot. I feel like he is one of the more underrated role players in the league, because he can defend, he can knock down a shot, he'll rebound for you, he's got length. He does a lot of the little things that you want from your role players. So it does suck that he had to just be shipped out as a salary dump. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not the biggest thing in the world. And those are really the only two super big notable losses this offseason. I will give a quick shout out to Alec Burks, who is currently still sitting in free agency at the time of recording this video. It doesn't look like he'll be signing back, but he played a decent amount of games for the Heat last year. And then also Kevin Love, he was included in a trade where he got sent to the Utah Jazz. At this point in his career, Kevin Love really wasn't too big of an impact for the Miami Heat, but he has been on the team for a few seasons now, so I did want to give a quick shout out to Kevin Love and, wishing him luck on his new team. And that's a perfect segue into the guys that Miami are actually adding this offseason. I mentioned they traded away Kevin Love, and they traded him to Utah in a 3-team trade. Overall, just to quickly recap, how it worked was Norman Powell went to Miami, then Miami sent out Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson to Utah. Utah then sent John Collins to the Clippers. But essentially all that you Miami Heat fans need to know is you gave up Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson for Norman Powell, which when you talk about value-wise, that is incredible value. I was just talking about how Kevin Love now at this age isn't much of an impact player. Kyle Anderson was included in the Jimmy Butler trade. He wasn't really too big of a piece or a player here in Miami. So to get rid of both of those guys as essentially salary filler, give up no draft capital, nothing else of value, and get back a player of Norman Powell's stature coming off a career year. Again, value-wise, just incredible from the Miami Heat. And I like Norman Powell as a player. Like I said, he's coming off a career year with the Los Angeles Clippers, where he really showcased himself as a great three-level scorer, really good as a shooter, whether it's, movement where he's coming off of screens or just a catch and shoot. He is just one of the better shooters in the league and really just elevated his game all around as a scorer. I will say I'm a little bit concerned about the backcourt of him and Tyler Hero. I feel like they have a lot of overlapping skill sets in certain aspects. I do think that Tyler Hero is a better player overall, a better ball handler, better playmaker. But when you just talk about offensive-oriented guards that are looking to score first most of the time, I feel like that kind of fits both of them. So to have both of them as your starting backcourt, both of them not being great defensively, I do question the fit a little bit. But like I mentioned, when you talk about the value that they gave up for what they brought in, it's perfect. I would still do this trade 10 times out of 10 for the Miami Heat. The Heat also are getting Simone Fontecchio. He was the guy that they're getting back in the sign and trade for Duncan Robinson from the Detroit Pistons. And Simone Fontecchio, I think he last year was a little bit shaky with the Detroit Pistons, but overall for the last 3 years of his career, he came into the league being an incredibly good three-point shooter, again, with some length, kind of like I was talking about with Duncan Robinson. I would definitely say Duncan Robinson is closer to a wing. Simone Fontecchio is more of that 3 or 4. He's more of a forward. So positionally, he's a little bit different, but skill set-wise, as a guy who is just an incredible knockdown three-point shooter, Simone Fontecchio is just that. So he kind of, they're getting rid of some of that three-point shooting from Duncan Robinson, but they're getting some of that right back with Simone Fontecchio. The Heat were doing more than just trades this offseason, of course, though. They also drafted Kasparas Yakachonis with the 20th overall pick. And I really like this draft choice for the Miami Heat because Yakachonis kind of fits that new age guard archetype, if that makes sense, where you have really good size, you can score the basketball, but also have good enough playmaking skill sets, kind of like a combo guard, but at least in college at Illinois, Yakachonis was their lead guard and their offensive engine for a lot of the time. I don't know if he'll get to that right away here in Miami, but I do think that that's a skill set that they look from him and that, eventually they want to bring out of him. Being 6'6", like I mentioned, he has that good size. His athleticism isn't amazing, especially at the NBA level, but he does good where he uses his size to kind of make up for his lack of athleticism, both defensively to stay in front of guys, disrupt them with his length, and then offensively to get to the rim and finish over some of the smaller guard defenders, or even just use his length to get to his spots and raise above them. The three-point shooting is a little bit of a concern, I could say. He didn't shoot the ball amazingly in college, but he was very streaky and sometimes he got hot. And then also his free throw percentage, that's usually something that a lot of people look at to see if someone has shooter's touch or whatever. He shot incredibly well on pretty good volume from the free throw line. So I do think that he'll eventually be able to shoot the three ball. But again, at first, he's probably going to be a little bit raw. And then last but not least, of course, the Heat had to make some free agency moves as well. They signed Precious Achiuwa to a 1-year veteran minimum contract. Precious was drafted to the Miami Heat way back when, I forget what year, but a few years ago now. Bounced around the league. He was most recently with the New York Knicks. Now he lands back in Miami. And then although these guys aren't technically new additions, the Heat did re-sign some of their own free agents, including Davion Mitchell, who they re-signed to a new 2-year, $24 million contract. And then Drew Smith, they signed to a 3-year, just under $8 million contract. The last year on that contract is a team option, though. And now that we recap the offseason for the Miami Heat, let's take a look at a potential rotation we could be seeing from them. In their starting lineup, we have Tyler Hero, Norman Powell, Andrew Wiggins, Bam Adebayo, and Khalil Ware. And then off their bench, we have Davion Mitchell, Pele Larson, Jaime Jaquez, Simone Fontecchio, and Nikola Jovic. So I usually will talk about the team overall and certain players in their rotation, and and then I'll get to some notable reserves that, in my mind, could make the rotation. They just didn't make what I, put up on the screen in that graphic. But for the Miami Heat, I think I want to start by talking about the notable reserves for a few reasons. First off, just Erik Spoelstra, I think, is one of the best coaches in the league at using his entire roster. He will not shy away from putting his 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th man into some positions of getting some real playing time, insert them into the game in the second quarter. There's some teams where they will use their 10-man rotation. If there's an injury, they'll slot someone up, and that's about it. Erik Spoelstra and the Miami Heat, they don't shy away from using their entire roster. So I do think that there's going to be plenty of guys that I didn't include on that screen right there that will get a decent amount of play time for the Miami Heat. On top of that, though, they also are experiencing injury, specifically to Tyler Hero. Obviously, he's one of their best players, one of their lead guards. He's not going to be ready for the start of the season, so they are going to have to insert other people into this rotation to, take up some of his minutes, obviously. So just real quick to talk about some of the notable reserves from the guard position to replace some of Tyler Hero's, production. I do think that Terry Rozier is a name that could be inserted into this rotation. I know Terry had a really rough year last year, to say the least. So we all know what he once was and what he could do in this league as a ball handler and a scorer and a creator. It's just about if he can get back to that. Obviously, we want to see what we saw from Terry from, when he was playing with Charlotte and all of those teams. Will we? Probably not. I think that's a little unfair to expect that from him, but hopefully we do see some type of bounce back from him. With the Tyler Hero injury, he definitely will get an opportunity to do that. I do think, though, that Davion Mitchell will be the one that's slotting into the starting lineup. He was incredible for the Miami Heat last year, especially in some of those play-in tournament games. He was really good as a defender. He was knocking down the three-point ball. He was playmaking a little bit, too. So I really do think that he is going to be the biggest beneficiary, or benefactor, rather, to the Tyler Hero injury, but also a guy like Terry Rozier can slide up and be that backup guard, hopefully get himself back on track. If not Terry Rozier, I definitely could see them going to the rookie Yakachonis as well. I was just talking about how in college he was the main creator, so if he gets some of that opportunity to run some of those bench units, I definitely think that is a real possibility. Also, shout out to Drew Smith as a guard too. I don't know if he would really get any of those minutes to replace Tyler Hero, especially because he himself is dealing with some injury to start the year. I do think that once he's healthy, though, he will be getting some minutes in this rotation. And then the last guy that I put in as a notable reserve, he's not a guard. He's kind of separate from this whole Tyler Hero situation we're talking about, but that is Precious Achiuwa. If you guys noticed, I did start Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware in the starting lineup together. And, towards the end of last year, we did start to see that more often, where we saw them playing in lineups together. Bam was more the power forward, and just them two together as a defensive front court. It's really good. I get why Erik Spoelstra wants to do that, but you guys might also notice that I didn't have a true big coming off their bench. The biggest guy I really had, I think height-wise and playstyle-wise, was Nikola Jovic, who is definitely much more of a power forward, maybe some small ball fives, but not a five at any stretch. So if they are experiencing that they need more of a big presence off their bench, I definitely think Precious Achiuwa is a guy they can go to, being a versatile defender where he can move his feet on the perimeter, be very switchable like the Miami Heat like to be. He doesn't have the size or the rim protection that a Khalil Ware can bring, but I do think that if they're using him, it would only be in certain spot minutes, maybe still alongside a Bam Adebayo or a Khalil Ware, to kind of just keep the big presence in the front court, the defensive orientation of it, without giving up any much of that size. But back to the team as a whole, I do think that this team is still going to be one of the better defenses in the league. That's pretty much been the Miami Heat's MO for a while now. They want to defend, they want to be scrappy, and they still have the personnel to do it. I mentioned they have Khalil Ware and Bam Adebayo holding down the front court. Both of those guys are great defenders. Obviously, Bam Adebayo is one of the most versatile, elite defenders in the NBA, one of the best defenders in the NBA. And then Khalil Ware, with his length and rim protection and athleticism as well, to be switchable on perimeter, move his feet. Both of those guys in the front court, it's incredibly hard to score on them. And then they also have plenty of wings and guards and perimeter players that are positive defenders as well, like a Aaron Wiggins, like a Davion Mitchell, Jaime Jaquez will compete, Pele Larson will compete, Nikola Jovic. They have a bunch of guys out there that do it the Miami Heat way, the Heat culture way. They have pride in their defense. And that definitely seems intentional. It seems like the Miami Heat want those type of guys on the court, because then no matter what you have offensively, if you have a Jimmy Butler, if you have Tyler Hero who's injured, if you whatever it is, you can always rely on your defense. And I do think that that's still going to be something that the Heat will rely on. My biggest concern really just comes offensively, more specifically their creation, especially when Tyler Hero is missing time to start the year. Even when he comes back, obviously it's going to take him a little bit to get his feet back under him, get his rhythm going, and be the Tyler Hero we saw. I definitely think bringing in a guy like Norman Powell will help. But I also do think that when you look at their guard room right now, you have Norman Powell, who's coming off a career year. You have Tyler Hero, who's coming off a career year. You have Davion Mitchell, who's, not an entire career year, but from the games he was playing with the Miami Heat last year, he was playing some of the best basketball of his career. So if some of those guys come back down to earth, now you don't have a Jimmy Butler to rely on. We've seen Bam Adebayo just shy away from being really aggressive offensively. I just have some concerns for their offense and their creation and their aggressiveness. I do think that could be an issue for this team. I do think that all around, just the players on this team, they're relatively good passers, connectors. They'll keep ball movement going, and they'll have the system that Spoelstra is implementing, where they have their movement shooters, their screens, and all of that. I don't think that they're going to be able to have too much free-flowing good offense, if that makes sense, where they'll be able to kind of just bring the ball up, beat past their defender to create an advantage and then play out of that. I feel like it's going to have to be a lot of manufactured offense, which then could just turn into stagnant, sluggish offense. Now it's time to go over my ceiling, floor, and expectation for the Miami Heat. Starting off with their ceiling, I could see them being as high as the 6th seed. I definitely was going back and forth between the 6th and the 7th seed for the Miami Heat. I do think that there is some situation where they have just an elite team defense, and that is enough to really boost them in the standings of this really weakened Eastern Conference. They still have a lot of talent on this roster, like Bam, like Norman, like Tyler Hero. They'll have a full season of Andrew Wiggins and all of these other guys that came in from the Jimmy Butler trade as reinforcements. I was mentioning Jimmy Butler only played 25 games last year for the Heat before he got traded. So now, instead of just having nothing in Jimmy Butler's place, they will have something. And I do think that they could take advantage of some of these injuries and make it to the 6th seed. But when we talk about playoffs, I do think that it would be really difficult for them to beat one of those top seeds in the Eastern Conference. So I do think that at their ceiling, they are a first-round exit. Now to move on to their floor, this could come as a surprise because I do think the Heat have one of the biggest ranges in my ceilings and floors. But at their floor, I could see them being as low as the 13th seed and in the lottery. This would be a situation where their offense really is super sluggish and they are struggling because they don't have any true creators, especially when Tyler Hero is dealing with his injury to start. I could see them falling into a pretty deep hole that might just be too hard to climb out of. Even when Tyler is fully healthy, I don't know if they would be able to get themselves back on track depending on how much they fall in the standings to start. So in this case, at their floor, I do have them as the 13th seed and in the lottery. Then when you talk about my expectations, I expect them to be around the 11th seed. This was pretty difficult to really put a concrete number on, just because I want to give the Miami Heat the respect they deserve. They have been a incredibly ran organization. No matter who is on the court for the last few seasons now, they will scratch their way into the playoffs, and then from there they can scratch their way even further. I want to give Eric Spoelstra and the Heat that respect they deserve, but at that same time, when I look at this roster, there is just a decent amount of other rosters I like better. So I'm kind of trying to balance, all right, the roster's weak, but their coaching and front office is really good. They usually over-exceed, but I like this team a little bit more. I was really close to putting them at that 10th seed and making the play-in tournament, and obviously that changes a lot. We just saw last year you can sneak into the playoffs as the 10th seed. Ultimately, though, I ended up with the 11th seed and them being in the lottery. What do you guys think, though? Let me know in the comments below where you think the Heat will end this year in the standings, and will they make the postseason? How far will they make it? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. In the description, there's links to all my social medias, so make sure you follow me on all those to keep up to date with me. Catch ya.